Night temperatures will drop sharply, so again, be prepared for that. It will be a cold night. Again, it could be a little icy in the east where we keep 1 or 2 showers. But for many, certainly across England and Wales, Sunday's a dry and a bright day, clouding over across Scotland and Northern Ireland with some rain for Western Scotland and Northern Ireland later on.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing. I'm Arlene Foster and here's what's coming up over the next hour. Bills and taxes are soaring with families up and down the country hit hard from today. It's the Beat the Squeeze Day on GBNews. We'll hear from people affected. The Shropshire maternity scandal, which caused the death of more than 200 babies and 9 mothers too. Local MP Lucy Allan joins me here in the studio. And eco-protesters are back with their war on motorists. Activists adopt insulate Britain tactics and blockade fuel depots. Give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews.
Thank you, Arlene. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The cost of living crisis deepens for many households in Britain from today as the energy price cap rise comes into effect. On average, gas and electricity bills will cost an extra £700 a year. It comes ahead of the increase to national insurance later this month. Cabinet Minister Kit Malthouse told GB News the government's doing what it can to help those struggling.
Chancellor's moved to provide some assistance. £9 billion flowing through the council tax system. The national living wage rising by 6.6% today as well, to £9.50, which is £1,000 for every full-time worker on that wage. Obviously, we're increasing the national insurance threshold in July. That's another £330. And then the universal credit taper will give about 1.7 million families another £1,000 a year. So we are doing our best.
Specialist police officers have started to remove environmental activists blocking oil terminals across England. The group Just Stop Oil says hundreds of protesters have obstructed around 10 sites. It's calling on the government to stop funding new oil licences. Among those taken away by officers were 2 people who'd climbed on top of a tanker at an Esso depot in Birmingham. At least 6 arrests have been made so far. Several facilities have been forced to suspend operations as a result of the blockades. One protester spoke to GB News earlier.
If you see in that, we see what the future holds, and the future holds that there's going to be no security whatsoever if we continue producing more and more oil. You know, the climate crisis is going to take away all security that we know now, and if we don't change, you know, we have to make big steps, and although it can seem, you know, very radical and maybe very expensive, it's a transition that we have to make to protect the future.
And to Ukraine, the Red Cross is sending teams to the southern port city of Mariupol and says it's hopeful the evacuation of thousands of civilians can begin. Moscow's agreed to open a humanitarian corridor, but Ukrainian officials say it's still very dangerous for anyone attempting to enter or leave. Earlier, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said some progress had been made at peace talks with Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky's office confirmed further negotiations are continuing today. Refugees fleeing Mariupol have described the devastation they've witnessed.
I was in Mariupol the whole time. We just slowly watched how the number of our homes was getting smaller every day. Everyone I know, they don't have a house right now. I also don't have a house, and all the belongings that I have with me, that's all I took out.
We waited for the negotiations so much for 2 or 3 days. But when we realised on March 22nd that we had food left for 2 days and we were drinking water only by 2 gulps, we decided to leave. But we were leaving under shelling. It was scary.
The Ministry of Defence says Ukraine has retaken some of the villages captured by Russia. Sloboda and Lukashiva, located along the main supply routes to the capital, are back in Ukrainian control. However, the MOD says Chernihiv and Kiev have been subjected to continued missile strikes. That's despite Russian claims of reduced activity. President Zelensky says Russian forces have been forced to change their tactics.
To the north of Kyiv, in the direction of Chernihiv, in the Sumy region, the occupiers are being pushed back. They are aware that they can no longer stand the intensity of hostilities they could have held in the first half of March. But we must also understand that for the Russian military, this is part of their tactics. All this is not that easy. We know their plans. We know that they are moving away from the areas where we are beating them to focus on others that are very important, on those where it can be difficult for us.
Meanwhile, a Russian governor has accused Ukraine of attacking a fuel storage facility in the Russian city of Belgorod overnight. The official claims 2 military helicopters struck after crossing the border. Some areas of the city were evacuated. The claim, though, has not yet been independently verified. And in other news, the government insists it will ban gay or bisexual conversion therapy, but not transgender. It comes just hours after the Prime Minister had said he'd drop the ban entirely. Boris Johnson said to have changed his mind after seeing the furious reaction from LGBT groups and many MPs. The backlash followed the announcement that ministers were looking instead at ways of preventing conversion therapy through existing law. And free COVID testing in England has come to an end today. Those considered to be high risk and some NHS and social care staff will still be eligible. Ministers say most people no longer need to take lateral flows, but if you do want to buy one, they start at around £2 a test. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to the briefing with Arlene Foster.
And welcome to the show. 6 people have been arrested after a campaign group targeted fuel terminals in a protest against oil. Oil company ExxonMobil has temporarily suspended operations at 3 other terminals due to a series of coordinated small protests. Campaign group Just Stop Oil said it had blocked 10 critical sites, including in Birmingham, Hemel Hempstead and Hythe in Kent. Joining me now from Thurrock is GB News reporter Amelia Harper. Hi, Amelia. Do you want to give us an update on what's happening where you are?
Well, we're here at one of 3 sites across Essex that has been targeted by the environmental campaign group Just Stop Oil. We're here in Askew Farm Lane, and as you can see behind me, we've got the entrance to the company Exelum. There's an oil site just behind here, and we can see that we've got 2 gentlemen standing there with a Just Stop Oil sign. We've got an oil tanker here, and actually you won't be able to see it because we are struggling to see it here, but there is a chap who has chained himself using a D-lock by the neck to the front of that oil tanker in protest. Essentially, what they are saying is they want the government to de-invest in fossil fuel and oil projects. It's one of a number of protests at 10 critical oil sites across the UK. About a 10-minute drive down the road at an Esso, there's a blockade there, and also at Navigate Thames, a site down there as well, that is also being blocked off as well. But here with me, we've got the spokesperson here, Laura Norton, who's going to tell us a little bit more about what is going on. So Laura, just talk to me about why you are here and what it means to you.
Yes, first of all, we're not a campaign group as such. We are just individuals. We're just ordinary people who believe that we need to ask the government to get a grip and stop new oil. We're not asking that we stop oil entirely. That's impossible. The system is built around fossil fuels. We're asking for no new oil, so no new consent and licences for new oil, because oil and fossil fuels are destroying everything. They're destroying our environment, they're destroying our lives, they're destroying the climate.
Do you think this is the right time to do this? These are incredibly frustrating for motorists, these types of protests. How do you feel if you were to talk to a frustrated motorist? And also, today is the day when the energy price cap goes up. Fuel bills are going up a huge amount today. Do you think this is the right time, or do you think this is maybe the perfect time because of that?
I would say it was a perfect time. We're all absolutely, well, beside ourselves with the war in Russia and everything that's going on. But what we're trying to do is move away from fossil fuels. So move away from war in Russia, move away from dependence, move away from fossil fuels. If we can move to renewables, then we think the energy prices will go down. They're safer, cheaper and easier to install.
And I just want to talk to you about what it actually takes today. You've been here since about 4:50 a.m. You've got people that are chained, unfortunately, to the front of oil tankers and so forth. How are you going to the loo? How are you staying warm? How are the logistics operating for these sorts of protests?
Well, we have to admit we're terribly cold. We have been out here since very early this morning. We've got a number of different age ranges. We've got 2 octogenarians here sitting next to one of the oil tankers. So there are lots of people. Some of us will be wearing adult incontinence pants. Some of us will be taking Imodium. So it's uncomfortable. We're not really eating or drinking on purpose. So nobody wants to be here. Nobody gets up and says, I want to break the law. But we need the government to listen and just stop new oil. And if they're not listening to anything else, we think this is our last-ditch attempt, the only way that they might listen.
And how long are you going to be here? What are the plans for the rest of the day and the coming days possibly as well?
Well, we'd like to go home right now, and we'll go home straight away as soon as the government agrees to no new consents and no new licensing for new oil and gas. Otherwise, we'll stay here as long as we can. We're not at work, we're missing our jobs, our children. We should be at home, but we're here in a freezing car park, but we feel we have to because we have to act. And if our children look at us and say, what did you do, Mummy, in the climate crisis? I have to say I did something. So if you feel you can say, I did nothing, then that's fine, but we feel we have to do something.
Well, thank you, Laura, for your time. It is incredibly bitter and incredibly cold here. I think it's quite stark, the lengths that they are prepared to go to, such as wearing adult incontinence pads and wearing nappies just to be here for this length of time. It's not clear how long they are going to be here for, potentially the coming days, but they say until the government de-invests in future oil projects.
OK, thank you very much, Amelia. Quite incredible stuff there going on outside that terminal. Apparently renewable energy is cheaper energy and more reliable, and I'll be talking to John Redwood about that in my show at 3 o'clock to see what he has to say about all of that. So the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has vowed to go after the people responsible for the biggest maternity scandal in the history of the NHS, saying he will leave no stone unturned to ensure that they are held to account. An independent inquiry led by Donna Ockenden found that 201 babies and 9 mothers could have or would have survived if Shrewsbury and Telford Hospital NHS Trust had provided better care. And I'm delighted to say that joining me now in the studio is the MP for Telford, Lucy Allan. Lucy, thank you so much for coming in today to talk about this review. And this is something that came to you quite quickly after you were elected as an MP back in 2015, isn't it?
Yes, that's right. There are 1 or 2 high-profile cases that occurred about the time that I was elected in 2015, and I did raise those cases with the Hospital Trust management at my very first meeting with them. And the response was at that time that this is a one-off. This is something that historically has been a problem, but we are across this now. And they didn't want to pursue it further. And at subsequent meetings, I asked for maternity to be on the agenda as a regular issue that we would discuss. And it never, ever made it onto the agenda during all of those years leading right up until the Ockenden report.
Which is quite shocking, actually, because I've been a constituency MP dealing with hospitals in my constituency, and you would have thought that maternity would have been one of the issues that should have been on the agenda for these discussions, would you not?
Absolutely. And I wonder about the non-executive board. Was it on their red list, their risk register? If MPs were not being told, even when MPs were asking, what about the non-executive board? I find that troubling.
Yeah. And I have talked recently about defensiveness of some of our big institutions, whether it's the police or the NHS. Did you find that there was a culture of defensiveness when you were raising these issues on behalf of constituents?
There was an institutional blindness. It was normalising poor care. And rather than identifying a learning opportunity whereby what went wrong, how can we do it better next time, it was normalised as, well, that is what happens during childbirth. What do you expect? And minimising it, because while we were having meetings, more cases were happening, more deaths were happening. And if you look at the Ockenden review, and you can see throughout the timeline that 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, this was going on. And the MPs that are there to try and hold these people to account were not being given any information about these occurrences. And it does ask a very pertinent question: who is it that should be holding the NHS to account? Because it seems to me from this experience and other aspects that the NHS is unaccountable, and there is this sense that we will run our business how we choose to. We're not accountable to patients, we're not accountable to MPs, and actually not even really accountable to ministers who might produce funding, but they can't make decisions. And that is a very serious failing within the NHS.
Yes, and sometimes when issues are raised, the answer will come back, oh, that's a clinical issue, it's not something for you to be concerned about. I have had that in the past. And also I've had in the past that if you raise issues that somehow you're being disloyal to your local hospital and you're being disloyal to the NHS by even raising those issues. But surely there has to be a space where they are held to account, as indeed we all should be held to account, because these are people's lives. Isn't that right?
No, you make absolutely vital point, because there is an expectation that MPs will be on the side of the hospital. Where I come from, always, the expectation is I'm on the side of my constituent. If my constituent comes to me and says there is something wrong here, then I feel duty-bound to take that up. And I've always felt very strongly about that. And sometimes you will come up against hospital managers that say, no, Lucy, this person is a troublemaker.
Yes.
But you make your own judgment on that.
Yes.
And I won't have somebody who's lost a baby dismissed as a troublemaker.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's the scale of the numbers here, I think, which is really quite shocking, and the fact that it wasn't flagged as an issue going forward then, because 201 little babies lost their lives and 9 mothers. And that's not taking into account people who had very traumatic deaths or births, actually, and survived. So we're not talking about those numbers as well.
So while it's clear that there are maternity concerns across the NHS, and there was the Morecambe Bay report previously, it is also clear that this trust was statistically an outlier.
Yeah.
So between 2013 and 2017, it had 10% above average of neonatal deaths. Now that needs to be on someone's red flag list. It wasn't on ours. Was it on the board's list? And it should have been.
Yeah.
And why wasn't it?
Yeah. And Sajid Javid has been writing today in the Daily Telegraph about the fact that he feels that too many women have been left to suffer in pain, that clinicians need to listen to the voices of women. I assume that that's something that you would wholeheartedly agree with, Lucy.
Well, this is a key theme of this, that women weren't listened to, that they would literally have to sit there and say, I'm not going home until you have given me a scan to check whether I have retained placenta. And, oh, yes, actually you have. Why would you have to make such a big fuss in order to get the treatment?
You know, there are many women that won't do that, Lucy.
No, they won't.
There are many women who believe doctor knows best, NHS knows best. I will go home, despite the fact that I feel a little bit unwell and I'm not comfortable.
And this is the saddest thing about this whole story, is that the women, the younger women, the women who perhaps were less articulate, less educated, who had a far greater degree of deference to the system, to doctors, to consultants, they did what they were told. They didn't make a fuss. They believed, oh, well, it's quite normal to labour for 36 hours. You don't need a caesarean. And they believed it. And it is the women that were better educated, more articulate, more able to speak out that we've been hearing from. And that's actually why it took so long to come to light, because I got very few cases coming through my door saying something went wrong with my labour, something went wrong with my birth. And when this came to light, suddenly the floodgates opened and people were saying, oh, but that's what happened to me.
Yes.
And I'm like, but why didn't you say anything? Well, I thought it was normal. They said it was okay. And that is the saddest thing, that women didn't feel able to speak up. And I do hope that coming out of this, all women feel able to challenge. If they think something is wrong with their maternity care, that they feel able to speak up, to challenge and to be heard.
And you and I both know that childbirth is a traumatic time. And you shouldn't have to be worrying about challenging your carers or challenging the care that you're being given. But obviously some women did do that, others didn't. And they have now come to you and said that they did have a traumatic time and they feel that it should be raised. You will continue to raise those issues, I assume, Lucy?
Yes, and what has happened as a result of the publication of this report, in fact, is even more people are now coming forward, because you're so right. Women are at their most vulnerable when they're giving birth. They need as much support, encouragement as possible, and they need to have trust and confidence that the care they receive will be kind, will be compassionate, but most of all will be safe.
And most of it is, let's be honest, across the NHS. I mean, some of us have had really great care when we've been giving birth, and I'm very pleased to be able to say that. But one of the families, since this report has come out, one of the families affected and lost a child, indeed, has asked for, calling for a register for NHS managers, so that if they're found to have been negligent in a case, that they can't just move to another NHS trust. Is that something that you would support, Lisa?
I'm very clear that there was a revolving door of senior management at this trust, and the consequence of that was that nobody was responsible for any of it, because they moved on to another job within the NHS.
Yeah.
They weren't sacked. And we do need to know that somebody is responsible and accountable. And if you're a chief executive of a hospital trust, you move on somewhere else. You can't leave this brutal carnage behind you and just move on, because where does accountability lie?
Yeah.
So yes, I do think we have got to have some mechanism of holding people to account, and that is missing.
Yeah. And Donna Ockenden, who led the review, she was a senior midwife and nurse, has said that she hopes that what happened will create a legacy of safety going forward. And I'm sure that you share that view as well. Interestingly, actually, in a hospital in Northern Ireland, overnight, the Lagan Valley Hospital. It has paused births in a midwifery-led unit due to concerns about a small number of cases. Do you think that this report will have wider implications across the UK in safety terms?
Yes, it absolutely must. Donna Ockenden has done a fantastic job. She has worked so closely with families on this. She's produced an incredible work which I hope will influence practitioners right across the NHS in ensuring we have safer care, more compassionate care, because that was what was lacking here.
Lucy, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your fight for justice for those families. And coming up after the break, we will be continuing our coverage of the cost of living crisis as increases in bills start to bite for millions across the country. But before that, here's the weather.
Hello again. It feels cold out there, certainly for the 1st of April, a chilly feel, although the wind's not quite as strong as they were yesterday. Sunny spells for most, and a few showers scattered around as well. But for many, it's dry and fine thanks to high pressure. But the wind's still drifting down from the north, and the isobars are pretty close together still across East Anglia and the southeast. That's where the strongest, coldest winds will continue to blow. And still plenty of showers coming into Kent for the next few hours. But otherwise, mostly dry until we hit the showers coming in for Lincolnshire, parts of Yorkshire, some snow mixed in with those, and snow across the hills and mountains of western Scotland, with some rain heading into Northern Ireland later on. Otherwise, as I said, a lot of dry, bright weather, but it is chilly. Temperatures might squeak up to double digits across the south. Generally, those single figures and feeling colder with that wind, particularly across the southeastern corner. That wind will ease a little overnight. The showers will tend to ease off across the east as well, but we will see some wet weather drifting southwards across Wales. That'll have some snow mixed in as well, particularly over the hills, but we could see some at lower levels. And with the showers keeping going across the east coast, could again be icy here as we go through the night as temperatures drop widely well below freezing even in towns and cities. So a cold, frosty start to the weekend. It will be a lot of cloud across Wales, southwest England, with some showers here during the morning. Again, some sleet and snow even to low levels. A sprinkling of showers then develops through the day over the Midlands and eastern England. Much of Scotland and Northern Ireland dry and bright, and plenty of sunshine elsewhere as well between the showers. But again, it is going to be cold, although the winds will be quite a bit lighter tomorrow, so perhaps it won't feel quite as bitter through Saturday. Heading out on Saturday night, temperatures will drop sharply, so again, be prepared for that. It will be a cold night. Again, it could be a little icy in the east, where we keep 1 or 2 showers. But for many, certainly across England and Wales, Sunday's a dry and a bright day, clouding over across Scotland and Northern Ireland, with some rain for western Scotland and Northern Ireland later on.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to the briefing. People around the country are tightening their purse strings even more from today as the cost of living crisis deepens for many households. It's a triple whammy. Energy bills will skyrocket, a raft of tax rises come into force, and then the government's proposed national insurance tax rise will come into force next Wednesday. GB News has a special day of coverage on what all this means for the pounds in your pocket. This is Beat the Squeeze.
We're heading for the biggest fall in living standards since the 1950s, and Rishi Sunak's spring statement measures will do little to offset that drop. This cost of living squeeze has been months in the making. As we emerged from lockdown, global supply chains remained broken. Demand has surged, but our economy struggled to get into gear, causing prices to rise. Even before Vladimir Putin chose to invade Ukraine, UK inflation was at a 30-year high. Now this conflict's stopping Russian and Ukrainian crops and energy exports reaching global markets, again causing prices to spiral. From today, April the 1st, household utility bills go up by 54% on average to almost £2,000 a year, with bills set to rise even further in the autumn. Also from today, council tax bills rise by 3% on average, although those in bands A to D are in line for a £150 rebate. From next week, national insurance contributions increase by 1.25 percentage points for employers and employees. That will cost basic rate taxpayers an extra £178 a year on average, while those on higher rate tax will pay, again on average, £715 more. As these higher bills and tax rises take hold, wheat, barley and fertiliser prices are also soaring, pushing up food and drink prices in the shops, restaurants and pubs. Petrol and diesel costs are also on the up, of course. It's now almost £100 to fill up a family car. And Sunak's spring statement fuel duty cut has been only partly passed on by retailers, with pump prices still rising. GB News has been highlighting inflation and the rising cost of living for months. But today's a day when the cost of living squeeze got significantly tighter.
So, as we've been hearing, most households in Britain will see their energy bills rise by 54%. That's almost £700 to just under £2,000 a year. That's the biggest increase in living memory. Many have already been feeling financial pressure. And a Yorkshire food bank reporting that there has been a dramatic rise in pensioners using their service, as well as people who have never used a food bank before. Our reporter Anna Riley has the story.
75-year-old pensioner George Ford already owes more than £1,400 to his energy company and fears that the April price hike will bring him to an early grave. The Army veteran's already making the tough decision of whether to heat his home or eat a meal, and says he's lost 2 stone within a month because he can't afford to put food on the table.
Now I sit here till about 10 o'clock with no light on, and I make a flask of coffee or tea to last me all the time so that I'm not using it so much. But my bills never seem to go down. Can't afford it. And I know that with the things I suffer, COPD, heart trouble, I've got no feelings in my hands or my legs. I don't think I'm going to be alive for Christmas because I won't be able to keep myself warm. And I feel sorry for a lot of pensioners that's out here. It's going to hit them very much, and I will be honest, it's going to hit the food banks more.
To keep warm, George wraps up in a coat, hat, gloves and scarf. Even though he volunteers at a food bank, George is very reluctant to receive help from there.
I won't take anything from the food bank because there's family that need it, children that need it more than I do. I'll be honest, I just feel like dying.
George volunteers at the Beanie Street Food Bank, which helps up to 350 people a week. Founder of the organisation, Robbie Keane, says they've recently seen a dramatic increase in the number of pensioners and working people using its services, as well as first-time food bank users.
We are seeing an awful increase in pensioners, and pensioners very worried as opposed to people on universal credits and stuff. It's pensioners, I suppose it's universal pension. I think they would be on, but they're very, very worried and scared, especially cost of electric, cost of food even going up itself in supermarkets and stuff. It's quite scary. And we support an awful lot of people within work poverty, and that seems to be creeping up as well big time over the last, say, 2 to 3 weeks. We have seen a number of increases in people coming that have never used the food bank before. I would suggest that it's definitely up by 30 to 50% up in around that bracket.
Today's energy price increase is only the start of gas and electric bills increasing. With prices expected to go up again in 6 months' time, community support from food banks like this is more important than ever. Anna Riley, GB News, Hull.
It's a very impactful report there from Anna Riley, giving us the human face of the cost of living crisis. And coming up after the break, we'll talk to a fuel poverty charity about the removal of the energy price cap and what it means for families. But here, first, it's Rhiannon Jones with your news headlines.
Thank you, Arlene. It's 12:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. The cost of living crisis deepens for many households in Britain from today as the energy price cap rise comes into effect. On average, gas and electricity bills will cost an extra £700 a year. It comes ahead of the increase to national insurance as well as other bills. Specialist police officers have started to remove environmental activists blocking oil terminals across England. The group Just Stop Oil says hundreds of protesters have obstructed around 10 sites. It's calling on the government to stop funding new oil licences. More than 30 people are understood to have climbed on top of tankers at Grays in Essex. At least 6 arrests have been made so far. The Ministry of Defence says Ukraine has retaken some of the villages captured by Russia. Sloboda and Lukashiva, located along the main supply routes to the capital, are back in Ukrainian control. However, the MOD says Chernihiv and Kyiv have been subjected to continued missile strikes, despite Russian claims of reduced activity. The Ukrainian President's office confirmed further peace talks with Russia are continuing today. The Red Cross is sending teams to the southern port city of Mariupol and says it's hopeful the evacuation of thousands of civilians can begin. Moscow's agreed to open a humanitarian corridor, but Ukrainian officials say it's still very dangerous for anyone attempting to enter or leave. Earlier, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said some progress had been made at peace talks with Ukraine and that Moscow was preparing its response to proposals. And free COVID testing in England has come to an end today. That as another record number of people in the UK have had COVID. At the end of last week, an estimated 4.9 million people had it, up from 4.3 million the week before. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. Those considered to be high risk and some NHS and social care staff will still be eligible for free tests. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. The briefing with Arlene Foster's back in just a moment.
Europe is in the grip of the most devastating humanitarian crisis since World War II.
The people of Ukraine are facing unimaginable suffering
as their homes are destroyed and their loved ones are killed.
Millions of people are being forced to flee for their lives, carrying only their children, their pets, and the clothes on their back.
The pain, loss, and destruction grows by the day.
The people of Ukraine urgently need our help.
Already a vast humanitarian operation is underway. Britain's Disasters Emergency Committee, or DEC, brings together 15 leading aid charities to respond to overseas disasters quickly and efficiently. These charities include the British Red Cross, CARE, Oxfam, Save the Children, and World Vision.
Their teams are working on the ground in Ukraine and neighbouring countries to bring vital aid to those who need it most. If you can spare it, your gift to the DEC's humanitarian appeal will go a really long way.
£10 provides essential hygiene supplies for a person for a month.
£50 provides blankets for 4 families.
£100 provides emergency food for 2 families per month.
It's easy to give. You can donate online at dec.org.uk or call the 24-hour donation line on 0370 60 60 900. If you prefer to send a cheque, please post it to the Ukraine Humanitarian Appeal, PO Box 999, London, EC 3A 3AA. To give £10 on your mobile, simply text the word crisis to 70150. Standard network charges apply for calls and you must be 16 or over. Texts are charged at the standard network rate and your £10 donation will be added to your bill.
100% of your donation goes directly to the DEC to save lives and deliver critical support where it's needed.
Welcome back to the briefing. Well, as we've been hearing from today, energy prices are going up, taxes are going up, and your national insurance too. GB News has a special day of coverage. This is Beat the Squeeze. And on top of all of that, from today, you may pay more for your pint. Having been reduced to help businesses during the pandemic, VAT will return to 20% in the tourism and hospitality sector. That, of course, includes our pubs. Our reporter, Ellie Costello, is at the Railway pub in South Woodham Ferris. Ellie.
Good afternoon, Arlene. Yes, I'm in the Railway pub in South Woodham Ferris. It is getting quite busy behind me, and for once we're not actually here to get a drink. We're here to talk about the rise in VAT. So VAT was cut to 5% in July 2020 to help businesses like this get through the pandemic. And then it rose to an interim 12.5% in October of last year. But today, April the 1st, it returns to 20% VAT. Now, as you can see behind me, the Railway pub is a huge pub. It's got a really large capacity, lots of tables here. There's a big beer garden out the back as well, which is great for this venue, but it does mean that's lots of tables to fill and a lot of pressure to keep that money rolling on in. Well, earlier I spoke to the owner and the landlord, Mike Graham, about this rise in VAT, and this is what he told me.
It will affect me in many ways, but I think the biggest thing, obviously, naturally, within business is profit margins, isn't it? I felt like with the current economic affairs within the country, it was providing a bit of a cushion, VAT. The reduction in VAT was allowing us to not increase prices, even though suppliers have maybe increased prices, as it's all a knock-on effect at the end of the day. So, yeah, I mean, even if you look at things like the increase of national minimum wage, that will bring staffing bills up. And yes, like, it was foreclosed to come and we did kind of expect it, but it doesn't make things any easier when it comes.
What would you say to Rishi Sunak if he were to pull up a pew here and chat to you at your bar?
Yeah, I think like we always take a relaxed approach here, you know, as landlords and how we are. I'll probably start off by buying him a beer, then we'll have a chat. And like you say, I'd like to just say to him, look, we are the bottom end of the stick, you know, we take the stick, sorry, we're the bottom end of the chain. So when you're talking to customers, when we have to say to someone, right, that pint's gone up by 2% or whatever, which works out to say 20p or whatever it is, from the knock-on effect all the way from the top of that supply chain, we're the one that's going to take the flak from the customers, from people that put money in the pockets and people that spend their money within the economy, and that's a hard thing to do.
That's Mike Graham. He's the owner and the landlord of the Railway pub in South Woodham Ferris. Well, today, the industry body UK Hospitality has warned that the increase in VAT will mean that pubs like this will struggle to pass on any savings to customers. And they've also warned that tourism and hospitality venues, more of them may go out of business now than they did during the pandemic, simply because that safety net has now gone. While the government says that it's done a huge amount to support the tourism and the hospitality sector throughout the pandemic, and they always made it clear that those low VAT numbers were only temporary, and it was always going to rise back up to that 20% on April the 1st. Arlene.
Thanks, Ellie. Certainly it's going to be a tough time for pubs and our hospitality sector generally, but thank you for that report. And we're going to move on now to talk about energy costs. And joining me now is the CEO of National Energy Action, Adam Scorer. Adam, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. The Chancellor in one of our papers today has said, and I quote, "Things will be tough, but I've done all that I can." Has he?
No, quite simply, he hasn't. The Chancellor had a very clear decision to make, and he was explicit about it. He could provide deep, targeted support to the most vulnerable, people on the lowest incomes, or he could try to do a bit for everybody, and he did the latter. So a bit of a gesture, I think, primarily. What he needed to have done, and I think what he's going to have to end up doing, is provide a deep, targeted support to households on the lowest incomes and in the least efficient homes, to ensure that their household budgets are not devastated by the sorts of price rises that we're seeing today and that we know we're going to see in October. So, no, priorities are wrong. They need to sort themselves out, understand what the role of the state is at moments like this.
And Adam, you may not have seen it, but we had a report from one of our reporters, Anna Riley, where she was talking to a pensioner who said that he'd lost 2 stone in weight over this past number of months because he can't afford to eat and heat. And he doesn't believe that he'll be able to survive come Christmas. I mean, that's an incredible story to hear from that man. Is that something that you're hearing in your organisation?
We've heard it for many years, and we're hearing it more. I mean, it's absolutely right. And actually, it's not just between the cost of heating and the cost of buying food. People can't afford to cook food. They can't afford to heat water, to shower or to bathe. They can't afford to put the washing machine on. They can't afford a warm environment for their children to study in or for friends and family to come over. So the impact is not just financial hardship. And you're absolutely right. We look at about 10,000 people every year in the UK die, mainly older people, directly from the impacts of a cold home, through strokes and heart attacks and respiratory conditions. Look, and it's quite simple. Next winter, when the prices go up again in October, we will see more avoidable excess winter deaths. It's hardwired into the situation we're in. That's why urgent support is needed now, and that's money in people's pockets, the lowest incomes, or money off the bills. But we need a plan for what we're going to do before next winter, when we're going to have astonishing levels of energy costs in some of the worst insulated homes in Europe, with the prospect of, we hope it won't be, a cold winter. Only one thing happens in those circumstances. People are ill, people's mental health suffers, and too many people die.
Indeed. And I mean, I was really struck by that report that we had earlier on in the programme, because it was just so stark that he had lost so much weight in quite a short period of time. But how many people would you say are in fuel poverty across the UK at this moment in time, Adam? And how many will fall into fuel poverty as a result of this perfect storm which is coming towards us?
Yeah, I mean, Arlene, it's absolutely remarkable. Last October, we were looking at 4 million households across the UK being classed as being in fuel poverty. That's having to spend 10% of their income to afford a decent level of heat. When the prices went up last October, that number jumped to 4.5 million households. Today, with the impact of these price rises, that's going to be around 6.5 million households. That's an astonishing number. And I don't want to think about the scale of the challenge that we'll face if we have the sorts of price rises expected in October. But that's 6.5 million households. And that includes, it's going to include about 2.5 million households with people with disabilities or long-term medical conditions who have to stay at home and whose conditions get worse in cold homes. 2 million pensioner households, over 1 million households with children under 5. And this is the point. It's not just financial hardship. It's not just financial hardship. It's not a cost of living crisis. It's going to be a cost in lives, the quality of life and actual lives, unless we face the reality of what it means for the people on the lowest incomes and in the least efficient homes. And gestures, a little bit for everybody. I understand the politics behind that, but it's not the appropriate response from the government to this challenge.
So just lastly then, Adam, obviously there are some things we can't control in relation to the supply of our energy and the cost. I'm thinking, of course, of the war in Ukraine. But is there anything else tangible that the government should be doing? You've mentioned gestures aren't enough. You would obviously like to see more targeted approach to the worst off. Is that what you would like to see happening quickly?
Absolutely. There's two things. There's money in the pockets of the poor, or money off their bills. But long term, the way you insulate people, especially those on lowest incomes, from the vagaries of global commodity prices, is to insulate their homes. Worst housing stock in Europe, loses heat faster than anywhere else. Warm homes, not just full pockets, are what we need. People need to be able to have the benefit of a warm and safe home. So let's insulate the homes, especially of the poorest and those on lowest incomes. That's the way to make sure that people's bills come down, the geopolitics doesn't affect them, and they have the benefit of a warm, safe and healthy home.
Adam, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I'm going to now bring in former MP and former CEO of UK Energy, Angela Knight, to continue this conversation about energy, not just cost, but supply of energy and our mix of energy sources. Angela, you will have heard Adam say there that we need to insulate more of our homes. I presume that that's something you would very much agree with.
Absolutely. I mean, there's been some very good insulation programmes anyway in the UK, but Adam's got a very valid point, and that is that we still have got quite a significant proportion of our housing stock where the insulation isn't good enough. Now, that's not going to help anybody right this very minute, but I do think that there's a lot of sense in having a steady, continuous and targeted programme of insulating properties. And with that I fully support Adam on that proposition. But I'm equally sure that that is something that the government will look at as well. You see, there's a number of problems, aren't there? And they're all come together as far as energy is concerned. Indeed, we've got cost of living issues generally. But a number of things have happened that have absolutely brought the focus onto energy in a way that they have not for many years. Global gas prices have been cheap for many years. So there's been lots of reasons why the whole steady programme of closing down some of our old power stations, of opening up wind farms, of saying, well, we can always buy gas on the global market. And anyway, we still got 40% in the North Sea and long contracts with Norway, have meant that the actual attention on how much it costs has not been there. This current crisis has really brought everything together. Global shortage as a consequence of recovery from the pandemic and the war with Ukraine, coupled with the fact that we have shut down, dare I say it, rather a lot of our backup power stations, which has made us rather more dependent upon what happens on the wholesale market, has resulted in big spikes. And those big spikes are not short-term, they're going to be with us for a year. So if you're in government, first of all, you've got to get over the initial crisis, and I think that is what the declarations that were made by the Chancellor have done. He has given a bit of everything. There is more to the poorer end, but he's given a bit to everybody, recognising that everybody is facing an issue. And as we come through the winter, we're in the last, couple of weeks of the cold season, and then it warms up from there on, that gives time to decide, what are we going to do? What is he going to do? What is the government going to do this autumn? And so I would expect rather more to come along. And then we still need, as has been said, that programme for insulation, but we also need another programme to increase our self-sufficiency. And some of that I'm expecting to be in the energy announcement, which is due shortly.
Yes, and it'll be interesting to see what role nuclear and LNG and all of those things will play in that statement. But I just wanted to ask you, finally, Angela, about the issue of energy efficiency and the role that a decrease in demand could possibly play in where we are at this moment in time.
Yes, well, right now, one of the reasons why the costs are so high is simply because demand is high. And so you've got a supply and demand issue anyway. So some of that, of course, eases quite a lot as soon as we don't need to heat our houses so much because it's warmer outside and so on. And that's the point, as I say, which I suspect the government's been waiting for, in which they can start to think about what does one do for particularly the poor ends of society as we get to the autumn. The actual energy programme for making better insulating the houses and houses and flats and so on, yes, that needs to be thought through. We used to have some more general programmes there where insulation was done and a broader group of properties as a collective between some of the energy suppliers, local authorities, housing associations, and so on. Suppliers now, of course, aren't unfortunately making any money, so they don't have any big pockets. But thinking through how to bring back those programs in which large numbers of badly insulated properties can be done on a sort of block basis relatively quickly with combined pools of money involved, I think is very important. And that's where I hope thinking is going to go.
I hope so too, because I think energy efficiency is something that we don't talk a lot about now, so it'll probably come back to the fore. Angela, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. And we're going to wrap up the programme by talking about politicians, of course. And across the UK, they've been handed a pay rise from today of more than £2,000 to their annual salaries, on the same day as the cost of living crisis has hit millions of households. And joining me now from Westminster is our own GB News national reporter, Paul Hawkins. Paul, is this an April Fool's joke?
Yeah, some people might think it is, Arlene. The optics obviously don't look great. That pay increase for Westminster MPs of 2.7% set by a body called IPSA, that's the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority. Now, they decided on this pay increase a month ago, and it matches last year's average public sector pay increase. Now, the chair of IPSA, Richard Lloyd, has said it is fair, that it is right, and he said that MPs' work has dramatically increased. That's the word he used, dramatically increased in the last 12 months, and they haven't had a pay rise for 2 years. So he said 2.7% is about right, and of course with inflation at 7%, it's actually a real terms pay cut. But before you get the little violin out, bear in mind, as you've been saying on the programme this lunchtime, that energy bills rising at the same time, national insurance rising as well from next week. So that will put more pressure on the Chancellor Rishi Sunak to do more. Yes, last week he announced that 5p cut in the rate of fuel duty, and of course he raised the national insurance threshold by £3,000, but there's still more pressure on him to do more. Robert Halfon, for example, the Conservative MP, saying that the government should get rid of the green levy on bills, also maybe cut VAT from energy bills, at least in the short term, to give people a bit of respite. They're saying that waiting until October, when that loan rebate is going to kick in, simply isn't going to be enough for families, lots of families who need help right now. Another suggestion as well, of course, raising universal credit and welfare.
Thanks, Paul, for that update from Westminster there. So you've been watching The Briefing with me. Not normal for me to be here at 12 o'clock, but I'm back again today at 3 p.m, so I'll see you then. We'll be continuing the day of Beat the Squeeze coverage, hearing how people across the UK are trying to make ends meet. But up next, it's On the Money with Alistair Stewart.
Hello again. It feels cold out there, certainly for the 1st of April, a chilly feel, although the wind's not quite as strong as they were yesterday. Sunny spells for most and a few showers scattered around as well. But for many, it's dry and fine thanks to high pressure. But the wind's still drifting down from the north, and the isobars are pretty close together still across East Anglia and the southeast. That's where the strongest, coldest winds will continue to blow, and still plenty of showers coming into Kent for the next few hours. But otherwise, mostly dry until we hit the showers coming in for Lincolnshire, parts of Yorkshire, some snow mixed in with those, and snow across the hills and mountains of western Scotland, with some rain heading into Northern Ireland later on. Otherwise, as I said, a lot of dry, bright weather, but it is chilly. Temperatures might squeak up to double digits across the south. Generally, those single figures and feeling colder with that wind, particularly across the southeastern corner. That wind will ease a little overnight. The showers will tend to ease off across the east as well, but we will see some wet weather drifting southwards across Wales. That'll have some snow mixed in as well, particularly over the hills, but we could see some at lower levels. And with the showers keeping going across the east coast, could again be icy here as we go through the night as temperatures drop widely well below freezing even in towns and cities. So a cold, frosty start to the weekend. Will be a lot of cloud across Wales, southwest England, with some showers here during the morning. Again, some sleet and snow even to low levels. A sprinkling of showers then develops through the day over the Midlands and eastern England. Much of Scotland and Northern Ireland dry and bright, and plenty of sunshine elsewhere as well between the showers. But again, it is going to be cold, although the winds will be quite a bit lighter tomorrow, so perhaps it won't feel quite as bitter through Saturday. Heading out on Saturday night, temperatures will drop sharply, so again,